Archive skills are kinda broken, bro. Let me tell you why. If you saw our video on how to become a pro, you'll have seen that by looking at the opponent's character, you can guess what deck they might be playing, by considering what skill is most popular on that character, and making a judgment based on what decks are most played alongside that skill. You know that Yugo plays Clearwing Acceleration, which means that when you play against Yugo, you know that the majority of the time they are playing Speedroid. You know that Akiza plays Spell of Roses, so whenever you go against them, you know they are playing Rose Dragons. And this is pretty much the case all of the time, including if the player is using a skill that isn't deck specific, because you know what decks are most popular with that skill if you check Duel Link's meta. Archive skills come in and kick that whole concept in the ass. If you don't know yet, an archive skill is a skill that once you unlock it, you can play it on any character. Normally, every character has a list of skills you have to unlock for that character specifically, but once you unlock an archive skill once, you never need to unlock it again, because it's a skill every character can now select. Well, every character for that particular format, speed duels or rush duels. Since the rush duel format hasn't really developed that much, I'm just going to be talking about speed duels for the rest of the video though. Since an archive skill can be played on any character, if your opponent is using an archive skill, you won't be able to know for certain what deck they might be playing. If they are playing a character that has no good skills at all, you might guess, okay, they might be playing an archive skill, since there isn't any other good skill that the character could be using. But if they are playing a character who is commonly used with a popular deck, like they are using Playmaker, who is commonly used with 3FX or Code Talker Alive, naturally you can assume that they are playing 3FX or Code Talker Alive and act accordingly. But maybe they're playing an archive skill, so you don't have any way of knowing unless they have a skill that shows itself at the start of the duel. There are ways you can still tell though, whether they might be using an archive skill or not, and you might want to pay attention to this part of the video because I'm going to talk about some blunders you might be able to avoid. The information that you give to your opponent can be very small, but small things can make a big difference. If you decide to use an archive skill, you have to be very selective with which character you want to put it on. If you put it on a character whose skills are very uncommon in the meta due to a lack of relevance or just because all of their skills are trash, the opponent might think that you are a loser playing a trash deck. They might get overconfident, and that might be a weakness you can take advantage of. However, at the same time, a smarter opponent might think, okay, this guy's either playing a bad deck or he's using an archive skill, and I'm going to prepare for the archive skill just in case, and I'll be fine if it isn't, because their deck wouldn't be that good otherwise. When you are trying to get an upside against players with lower skill, you're providing an opening for players with better skill to take advantage of you. It is better for you to make preparations for better duelists, since those are the ones you should really be worrying about. Moving on, there are some skills that when you have them equipped, they activate at the start of the duel, so your opponent really doesn't have to guess what deck you're playing. They will already know from your skill. If you play a character who commonly uses a skill like that, but you are playing an archive skill, the opponent will be able to tell by the lack of the skill activating at the start that you are not playing the commonly used skill normally associated with that character. It is going to be pretty obvious that you are using an archive skill. So if you want to use an archive skill to its best advantage, you should use it with a character whose skill is both commonly used in the meta and whose skill doesn't activate at the start of the duel. This way, you can really take advantage of the fact that you are keeping information from your opponent, but we can take it a step further. Taking information away from the opponent in itself is already good enough. If they can't know what deck you're playing, then they will have a harder time preparing mentally and strategically for your deck. But more than taking away information, we can actually use archive skills to give our opponents false information that might harm them. In our video about becoming a pro, I mentioned how Salamangreats can do this with Ties That Bind. By using that skill on Yusei, instead of the better option Salads can use, our opponents are much more likely to prepare for our synchro strategy that we aren't even playing instead of our graveyard strategy. Many decks can summon rank 4 Xyz. If we play one of the better skills for Salamangreat, then the opponent can summon Abyss Dweller on us, so we are severely cut off from many of our important effects. But if we play Ties That Bind on Yusei, Ties still gives us some amount of benefit. But Yusei tricks the opponent into thinking we are playing a deck that Abyss Dweller isn't that good against. So instead, they might summon Steel Swarm Roach, a card that doesn't even affect us. This works because Yusei most commonly plays synchro Backrow based decks that Roach is very effective against. With archive skills coming into the game, we can do this exact same strategy with any deck that doesn't require a particular skill. If I'm playing Abyss Actors, which doesn't need a specific skill to function, I know that Abyss Actors has a weakness to certain options like Steel Swarm Roach, but no weakness at all to Abyss Dweller. So I could use a character whose most popular deck happens to have a weakness to Abyss Dweller, so the opponent may be tricked into summoning Abyss Dweller when it doesn't affect me much, if at all. So I have a lot less to worry about. Of course, everything I've mentioned only really applies if you go second. Obviously, if you are going first, then you are going to make your plays before your opponent. And it won't be a question whether or not you are playing something since you are literally already playing it. But statistically, since you can only go first or second, each option has a 50% chance of happening. 50% of your duels, no matter what deck you're playing. You are going to go second, so having every advantage you can find can make a difference. The amount of times I've won using Salamangreats just because the opponent thought I was playing a synchro deck is hilarious, and this can be mimicked forever with archive skills now. But are archive skills even good? You might think with this mental advantage that archive skills can provide, will the skills even be good enough to support our decks in a way that's valid enough to play them? I believe it isn't a question of whether they are good enough, because if they aren't that good, maybe your deck doesn't really need a skill anyway, and the minor literal advantage that might give you might be enough, since that mental advantage is good enough already. And if there isn't any good archive skills now, who is to say that better ones won't come out? The tricky thing about skills throughout Duel Links history is that they are always either super generic or they are tied to a specific character and therefore tied to a specific character deck. This has meant that the more powerful skills, being the deck specific ones, have only really been able to be made for anime decks. This has been great for anime decks, since anime decks for the most part are designed to just be used by anime characters, so the things that would be important in the actual game aren't as important, since the writers can give the characters whatever scenarios they want, and it doesn't have to be relevant to real gameplay. But in Duel Links, a skill can take an anime deck that is inconsistent and make it consistent. It can take a deck that has a really weird or bad win condition and provide it with a way to have a good win condition. It can take a deck that can't have one of its more overpowered cards for balancing reasons and make up for what that card would have given the deck with a skill effect. Anime decks have been given exactly what they need for a lot of Duel Links history, but this is a little bit unfair to some decks that seem to have a need for a skill due to some design flaw by the OCG, but since they aren't anime decks, they can't get that skill until archive skills come around, that is, because since any character can use them, they can be whatever they need to be without being character specific. Right now, Speed Duels only has 2 known archive skills coming to the game, but of course many more will be coming in the future. The ones we are getting are actually pretty good too. If your deck doesn't need a specific skill, or alternatively, if what your deck really needed was one of these skills. Neither of them have names yet, but the first one has 2 effects, each of which can only be used once per duel, and you can only use one of them in a turn. The first effect can be used if you have a combined total of 3 or more link ratings on the field. A rating is like a link monster's level, so you could have a link 3, or you could have a link 2 and a link 1, or you could have 3 link 1s, or any of the combinations I mentioned plus more link ratings. As long as you have at least 3, you can gain 2,000 life points. This is kind of like a replacement for 3 effects life gain effect, since some decks' ability to gain an insane amount of attack points on their link monster could have many duelists with 3 effects skill reaching upwards of 10,000 life points. That's just absolutely absurd. So 3 effects was nerfed to only allow 600 life points gained for each of the targeted monster's link ratings, meaning that if you had a link 2, you're only gaining 1200 life. And if you have a link 3, you're only gaining 1800 life. That is fine. It's still good enough for some decks that used it. A lot of the time, decks were simply using it to have enough life points to survive an OTK, and they wouldn't be gaining an absurd amount of life. This skill makes it so that if your deck can put up a link 3, or multiple link monsters with a combined total of 3 link ratings, you could get your life points up to Team 6k, which is definitely going to be enough to keep you alive from most OTKs, but it won't be an absurd amount to the point that it's pretty much impossible to kill you. The other effect of the skill, if it is turn 5 or beyond, and you have at least 4 link monsters in your graveyard, you can shuffle 4 of them into your extra deck in order to put a Mech Knight Crusadia Avramax into your extra deck for free. Before we talk about Avramax, I'm going to mention that shuffling 4 monsters from grave back into the extra deck is incredibly good in a grind game situation for some link decks, since there are many link decks whose primary focus is link climbing, which will eat up a lot of the extra deck very quickly. Shuffling them all back with this skill will allow you to keep your plays going for longer without having to play any main deck bricks to get that done for you. But the fact that you can get an Avramax out of it is pretty insane too. If your deck is capable of summoning it, it's a Link 4 that requires materials that were all summoned from the extra deck, which the skill can help putting your links back into the extra deck, and then if it is link summoned, it's untargetable by card effects the entire time it's on the field. Also, your opponent can't target your other monsters for attacks, they can only attack this one. But if this guy is in battle with a special summon monster, it will gain attack equal to that monster's attack for that battle, meaning that basically it's a bad idea for any of your opponent's monsters to attack at all, since they can't attack your other monsters, and if they attack this one, unless they are a normal summoned Blue Eyes White Dragon, then that monster is going to lose the battle and the opponent's going to take 3k damage. You can't target him by card effects, you can't beat him in battle either, so the only way to get rid of him is with non-targeting removal. But if he is sent to the grave by an opponent's card effect, he will non-target shuffle an opponent's card into the deck, meaning that even removing this guy isn't safe. The only safe way to get rid of this guy is with a kaiju, but on turn 5 and onward, it's not likely that you're going to have any kaijus. Realistically, because of this guy's attack gaining effect, it's not that likely that you're going to survive for long after this guy's summoned anyway, as that attack bonus also applies when he attacks too. This guy's an absolute house, and the fact that this is a good life gaining skill even without this guy means that the power that this skill can provide some link decks is absolutely busted in the right deck. I would want to use this in any deck that summons a link 3 on turn 1 in most situations, like Orcus summoning Decode Talker, Crusadia summoning Ecomax for example for that life point gain. I'd want to play it in link spam decks like Crusadia again for that added grind game, and in World Chalice as well, which is great lore wise because Avramax fits into the same lore as World Chalice, Crusadias and Orcus. The only issue being that Orcus might not be able to get out Avramax very often due to perhaps not having enough links in grave, or due to the fact that they can very easily lock themselves into summoning only dark monsters, and Avramax is a light monster. This is already going to be something to look out for on release, so be careful when you think your opponent might not be playing it, because an archive skill can be played on anybody. The other skill we are aware of actually replaces your normal draw for the turn with a mystical Space Typhoon from your deck. Of course, technically, you could do this with Destiny Draw 2, another commonly played skill, but the benefit of this is that its activation condition is a lot easier. If you have lower life points than your opponent, like if they use 3 effects, Life Boost Alpha or the Archive skill we just talked about, then you get to have it as your very first draw going second. And if your opponent has 3 cards in their back row, then you can also have it as your very first draw going second. Of course, this isn't specific to the turn, so it's not like a different scenario on subsequent turns, but the difference is that something like Destiny Draw requires you to have taken some amount of damage to search your back row removal, which could take all the way until your second turn. But if your opponent went first and gained life points or set 3 back row, then you can just top deck an MST and make things a lot easier. A lot of decks these days can play through 2 back row pretty decently, but the third one can really seal the deal, and in those decks, a big deck building issue is that just because of that weakness to the third back row, you gotta play some amount of back row removal or protection in order to help you make your play smoothly. Sometimes you're okay with that. Even so, you have a handful of great cards, but few or no ways to help you play through the opponent's back row. And all you can do is look at your deck and pray that you top deck your Cosmic. You have to hope that you can get it. With this skill, you could just play 1 MST, so the skill can guarantee you will get it when you need it, but you won't brick on it so much when you're playing against decks that don't play that much back row. Just having less life points could also be good in a grind game situation, but maybe you have been hit by an attack, so you meet the condition, and you have enough to make a follow-up play, but the opponent's got a back row that can stop you. Skill will draw your 1 copy of MST, and you can go about your follow-up turn more smoothly, giving yourself easier access to back row removal when you need it, also letting you play less overall back row removal in your deck so you don't brick on it, and so that you can play more of your other staple choices. This skill gives a huge buff to decks that don't need a particular skill. If you have trouble against multiple back row, you could potentially play 2 Cosmic Cyclones, since it is better than MST, and then 1 copy of MST to draw from the skill. If you went first, you could use your Cosmic on end phase, and then on your draw phase, since you'll have less life points, you can get your MST, get rid of a second back row. Maybe your deck actually benefits from destroying your own cards, like Abyss Actors, and you can give yourself a better chance at doing so by drawing MST with this skill. So we got a really great skill for some link decks, and a really great skill to buff decks that don't need a particular skill. If you feel like it's unfair that so many anime decks get supercharged skills that give them insane advantage advantage, now you have a better chance to fight back against them with the MST skill. And if you want to play a link spam deck but you are worried about your grind game since you use your resources up so fast, then you can take advantage of the Avermax skill, and you can do so while also tricking your opponent into thinking that you're playing a different deck. That's a lot of upside, and it's going to be super exciting to see what archive skills are going to come to Duel Links in the future. Let us know what you guys think about archive skills in the comments. Are you excited for the ones that are coming? What deck do you want there to be an archive skill for? And if you like this video, then slap like now, subscribe if you haven't already, hit that bell to get notified every time we make a new video. Have yourselves a good one, guys, and I've been Undead from Team 6K, signing out.
Hey, why they gotta hate on me? I done got me 250,000 views and they still saying they low key. They ain't wanna come work with the kid, but I'm flexing with Zay on beats. How they ask for a spot at the gym, but they leave all the weight on me. I don't ask them to wait on me. They would ask where they gon' be with a song if they wanted the weatherman. I ain't asking to pay no fees. She was homeless and needed a spot. I ain't ask her to pay no lease. I ain't ask her to say no please. I ain't ask her to make no cheese. Scream fake but it ain't on me. Got clean so it ain't no streets. Why green if it ain't no keeps? Brought cream so it ain't no beef. My team say it ain't no chief. My demon they hang on me. They seemingly ain't no peace. I seen him, he ain't no beast. For real.
Let me tell you why.